The first time a man asked Marin what she wanted, she was standing at her own counter in her own bathhouse with her own hands on the edge of the wood, and she did not know what to say. She stood there for longer than was comfortable, long enough that he might have thought she hadn't heard, and she thought about the question and found that the inside of it was empty. 6 years. She had been running this bathhouse for 6 years, and in 6 years no one had asked her that question, and in the absence of anyone asking, she had apparently stopped asking it herself, and the emptiness where an answer should have been was the most information she had received about herself in a very long time. Her name was Marin Alcott, and she had run the only bathhouse in Copper Springs, Colorado territory since the spring of 1876, which was 6 years and most of a life. She had bought it from a man named Greer who was leaving for California with the particular conviction of a man who is certain the next place will be better, which Marin had recognized as its own kind of grief and had not said so. She had paid $420 for the building, the equipment, the copper water system that heated 12 gallons at a time, and the goodwill, which in Copper Springs meant the knowledge that every man who came off the range or out of the mines needing a bath would come here because there was nowhere else. She had been 29 years old and had needed a reason to stay somewhere, and the bathhouse had been the reason, and she had stayed, and the staying had become the point. 6 years of 6 o'clock mornings, and water heated before anyone arrived, and the particular rhythm of a business that runs on other people's daily needs. 25 cents for a bath. This was the standard rate in Colorado territory in 1882, and Marin kept to it, because changing it would have required a conversation she did not want to have, and because 25 cents times the number of customers she served in a week added up to a living that was modest and real and entirely hers. 35 cents if you wanted the water changed between uses, which most men did not and the fastidious ones did, and Marin had learned to identify the fastidious ones by their boots before they ever spoke. The men who oiled their boots were the men who wanted clean water, without exception, and this was the kind of information that was useless to anyone except the person running the bathhouse, which was the kind of information Marin had accumulated across 6 years in enormous quantities. She could identify most things about most people before they spoke. She knew which men were carrying grief and which were carrying guilt, and she had learned that these were different weights that sat differently in a person's shoulders and back. She knew who drank too much and was managing it carefully, and who drank too much and was not. She knew who was writing to a woman back east and keeping it from the town, and who was 3 weeks from leaving even if he hadn't admitted it to himself yet. She knew these things because the bathhouse was invisible in the way that all necessary services are invisible. You forget the person providing the thing you need once the need is met, and invisible things see everything that visible things miss. She knew which men were writing to women back east and keeping it from the town. She knew who was drinking more than his friends had been told. She knew which rancher's operation was 3 bad seasons from failing and which homesteader's wife had been crying on Tuesdays for a month. She knew these things not because anyone told her. No one ever told her anything deliberately, but because 6 years of watching people come in from the range and the trail and the range again had given her an education in the specific grammar of how men hold themselves when something is wrong. The bathhouse was invisible in the way that service is invisible, and invisible things see everything that visible ones miss. She had one helper, a girl named Dee, 17, red-haired and quick and possessed of the particular intelligence of someone who has been paying attention to adults since before she was old enough to understand what she was learning. Dee handled the afternoon shift and the accounts on Tuesdays, and had opinions about most things, which she stated to Marin and to no one else, because she had also understood that the bathhouse saw everything and said very little, and that this was its own form of authority. Marin had not taught her this. Dee had arrived at it herself in the 3rd month, which was how Marin knew she was going to be fine. Seth Rourke arrived in Copper Springs on a Tuesday in the 1st week of November, which was when the carpenter work was available. The church had a roof section that had been deteriorating since the previous spring, and the school board had finally admitted that 3 planks in the schoolhouse floor were a danger that could not be managed by telling the children to step around them. The county seat had sent Seth, who arrived with his tools on a rented mule and went directly to the church building without stopping to introduce himself to anyone or to look around, which was the first thing Marin noticed about him. He was a man who went directly to the work without requiring anyone to see him go. This was not a common quality. She noted it from the bathhouse window as she watched him pass. A carpenter in a frontier town in 1882 earned between $2 and $3 a day for skilled work, and Seth was clearly skilled. The church roof progressed steadily through the first week, which she could see from the main street at opening time. The way the section took shape with the specific correctness of someone who understands wood at the level of instinct rather than calculation. He came to the bathhouse the first Saturday. He paid his 25 cents, which was what everyone paid. He took his bath. He left. He came back the second Saturday and the third, which was how regular customers worked, and Maren cataloged him in the way she cataloged everyone. The pattern of his visits, the fact that he paid exactly the right amount without being told, the fact that he was quiet in a way that was not unfriendly but simply complete, as if he had decided a long time ago what amount of conversation was necessary and had not exceeded it since. He began talking to her on the third Saturday, which was also not unusual. The bathhouse was where men talked the way they talked in barbershops, sideways, at the air, without making it a conversation by looking directly at the other person. He said the church roof was coming along and the schoolhouse floor had been worse than described. She said that was generally the case. He said it was. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How long have you run this place?" She said, 6 years. He said, "Do you like it?" She said it was a good business. He said, "That's not what I asked." She looked at him. He was looking at the far wall with the unhurried attention he gave to most things, and she understood he was not being impolite. He was asking what he meant to ask. She said she found it satisfying. He said, "That's closer to an answer." He paid for his towel and left. She thought about that exchange for 3 days, which was considerably longer than she usually thought about conversations. The specific quality of a question asked slightly to the left of the expected question. She had found herself returning to it the way you return to something that won't sit where you put it. Dee noticed she was not entirely present on the Tuesday and said, without looking up from the accounts, "Is it the carpenter?" And Maren said, "No," which was accurate in the sense that it was not him specifically, and incomplete in the way that most honest answers are. Seth finished the church roof in the second week of November and moved to the schoolhouse floor and finished that a week early, which meant he had nothing keeping him in Copper Springs past the third week of the month. He came to the bathhouse on the Saturday of the third week and paid his 25 cents and said, "I'll be heading out Tuesday." Maren said, "I imagine you've got work elsewhere." He said he did. He said, "What do you do on Sundays?" She said she worked. He said, "You work 7 days." She said the bathhouse didn't close itself. He said, "What do you do for yourself?" She opened her mouth to answer. The inside of the answer was empty. She stood there with his question in the air between them, and found that 6 years of running a necessary business had apparently not included the question of what she needed the business for, beyond the running of it. She said, "I keep the books on Sunday evenings." He looked at her. He said, "That's not what I asked." She said, "I know." He nodded. He said, "Well, safe travels then," meaning to her, which was an odd thing to say to a person standing in their own building, and she understood he meant it in the other sense, the larger sense, and she was still thinking about it when he left. He was gone for 8 days. She noticed this. She noticed that she noticed it, which was more information. She went through the 8 days in the usual way, mornings and hot water and 25 cents and towels, and the particular rhythm of a business that does not pause for the feelings of the person running it. And she thought about Seth's question with the regularity of something she couldn't put down. What do you do for yourself? She had grown up in Ohio. She had come west at 26 after the man she'd planned to marry had died of the fever that took a great many people the winter of 1872. And she had come west because staying in Ohio required being the woman whose intended had died, which was a story she was prepared to be done with. She had found Copper Springs, and found the bathhouse, and found a reason to stay. She had built a business and made herself necessary and useful and reliable, and she had, in the process of all that building, neglected to build anything for herself, not from self-denial exactly, but from the particular way that keeps a person occupied enough that the question of what they want for themselves never comes up with enough space around it to be properly heard. On the 8th day, Seth came back. He came in the afternoon on a Wednesday, paid his 25 cents, sat on the waiting bench when the tub was occupied, and stayed on the bench after he'd finished his bath, which was not standard practice. Maren finished with the previous customer and came out from behind the partition and found him still there. She said, "You need something else?" He said, "I got to Durango, realized I'd left something." She said, "What did you leave?" He said, "I don't know exactly. I was hoping you could tell me." She looked at him. He was looking at her in the direct, unhurried way he looked at things, like a man who has decided what he is doing and is not in a hurry to be somewhere else. She said, "You asked me what I wanted." He said, "Yes." She said, "Nobody's ever asked me that." He said, "I know." "I could tell." She said, "How could you tell?" He said, "Because you didn't have an answer ready. People who get asked things regularly have answers ready. You stood there like it was a language you hadn't spoken in a while." She was quiet for a moment. She said, "That's an accurate description." He said, "What do you want?" She said, "I don't know." He said, "That's honest." She said, "It's the only answer I have." He said, "It's a better starting point than most people have." He looked at the counter between them. He said, "I've got a job offer in Laramie. Good work, 3 months." He paused. "I told them I'd let them know by the end of the week." She said, "And?" He said, "And I've been sitting on this bench for 40 minutes thinking about it." She said, "What have you concluded?" He said, "That I came here before I answered them, which tells me something about the answer." She said, "What does it tell you?" He said, "That I care whether I leave here, which is the first time I've said that about any place in 7 years." He said it plainly, without asking her to do anything with it, just setting it on the counter between them the way she set clean towels for whoever needed it. She looked at him for a long time. She said, "The Hendersons have the back room on Callaway Street, 50 cents a week. It's small, but it's clean." He said, "That'll do." He paid for his towel and she gave it to him, and he folded it and set it on the bench and stood up. And neither of them said anything else that needed saying, and that was how it began. Not dramatically, not with a decision announced, but with a man who told a boarding house widow he'd take the room and a woman who gave him a clean towel and did not say what she was thinking, because what she was thinking was the beginning of the answer she hadn't found yet, and it was too new to speak and not too new to keep. The weeks that followed had the texture of something thawing slowly in the right conditions. Seth found carpentry work in Copper Springs and the surrounding area without difficulty. A barn repair 3 miles out, a porch in town, a widow on the South Road whose kitchen floor had been a problem since the previous winter. He came to the bathhouse in the early evenings after the rush had settled and Dee had gone home, and he would sit on the waiting bench and she would come around the counter, and they would talk in the way of people who have both been quiet for a long time and are discovering that conversation is like a muscle. It remembers how to work if you give it the chance. He told her about his wife and his daughter on a Thursday evening in late November, which was the same week the first serious snow came to Copper Springs. His wife had been named Clara. His daughter had been 4. Fever, winter of 1875. He had been working a job 40 miles east and had come home in the spring to a house that had changed shape in the specific way that houses change when the person who made them a home is no longer in them. Not the rooms or the furniture, but something structural, something in the quality of the air. He had been moving since then, taking work where the work was, arriving and leaving and arriving and leaving. And he said he had been doing this for 7 years and was tired of it in the way you get tired of a thing that was necessary once and has become a habit you have not examined. He told her this plainly, setting the information on the table between them without asking for anything in response, just here for whoever needs it. She told him about Daniel and about Ohio and about coming west at 26 with $420 and a need to be somewhere that didn't know her as the woman whose intended had died. She told him about the particular discipline of building a business from nothing and about how the building had eventually become the whole project, filling all the available space, and about how she had not noticed that she had stopped building toward anything beyond the next morning's hot water and the next week's accounts. She said this clearly and without self-pity, because it was simply what was true, and she had spent 6 years being the person who stated what was true without dressing it up. He listened the way he listened to everything, completely, without interrupting, without offering her the comfort that would have made it easier for him and less accurate for her. When she finished, he said, "You built something real." She said, "Yes," he said. "And now you need to decide what it's for," she said. "I know," he said. "That's different from knowing the answer," she said. "Yes, it is." One Sunday morning in December, Maren did not open the bathhouse at 6. She had told Dee the night before, which was the first time she had made such an arrangement in 6 years, and Dee had said, "Good," in the tone of someone who has been waiting for this specific development and is relieved it has finally arrived. Maren put on her dark wool shawl and walked out of the bathhouse and through Copper Springs and past the church where Seth had repaired the roof and past the schoolhouse where he had fixed the floor and out to the edge of town where the buildings stopped and the Colorado Plains began. She had not thought specifically about where she was going. She had thought outside the bathhouse. She had thought somewhere without the counter between herself and the air. The December morning was cold and flat, and the sky was the particular pale blue that comes after a week of gray, and the mountains to the west were doing what they always did, which was stand there in their extraordinary permanence and refuse to be affected by anything smaller than a geological event. Seth was there. He had not been told. He was sitting on a low, flat rock at the edge of the plain with his plain dark felt hat set beside him, looking at the mountains with the complete unhurried attention he gave to things he found worth looking at. He turned when he heard her. He said nothing. He moved over on the rock. She sat beside him. They looked at the mountains together. The cold December air came across the plain with the steady patience of cold air that knows it has a long season ahead of it. After a while, she said, "I want to keep the bathhouse." He said, "All right," she said. "And I want Sundays," he said. "Those seem like compatible things," she said. "And I want to stop being invisible," he said. "I see you," she said. "I know." She said it the way she said things she had fully decided, plainly, without softening or performance. He looked at her. She looked at the mountains. After another while, he said, "That's 3 things," she said. "Yes," he said. "Is there a 4th?" She was quiet for a moment. She said, "I'm still working on the 4th," he said. "Take your time," she said. "I intend to." They sat in the cold December morning with the mountains, the same mountains they had always been, and the plain, the same plain, and the two of them something that had not been there before and was now simply there, the way things are that have settled into their right place. By the end of December, she had taken every Sunday morning off, which Dee entered in the accounts without comment, and which the regular customers adapted to with the pragmatic flexibility of people who understand that a person who works 6 days has earned 1 morning of being unavailable. Seth came to the edge of the plain every Sunday, and she came and they sat together in whatever weather Colorado offered, which varied considerably. She asked him on the 3rd Sunday what he had told the Laramie job. He said he'd already written to them. She asked what he'd said. He said he had work closer that would take longer than expected. She said, "Is that true?" He said, "The Henderson back room has a shelf that wants replacing. The school board is going to have opinions about the east wall in spring, and the church door's hinging isn't right." She said, "That's not 3 months." He said, "No." She said, "What is it then?" He said, "A reason to stay somewhere long enough to find out what it is." She said, "I understand that." He said, "I know you do." She never asked him to stay in the way of asking. Openly, with the word in it. She had spent 6 years being the person who did not require things of people, and she was not prepared to change that entirely. She just went to the edge of the plain on Sunday mornings. He was there every time. The mountains were the same mountains they had always been. They looked different with someone beside her, which was either the mountains or her changing, and she decided it was both, and that both was right, and that right was what she had been building toward all along without knowing what to call it.